Where is your attention at the moment? We've had these tariffs on goods from Canada, Mexico and China to come in on Tuesday. We've had some counter tariffs announced and possibly more to come.
Yeah, it's going to be a very hard one for the Australians to figure out because if you thought that anyone was going to be the last in line for tariffs, you would think it would be America's closest ally. And America's closest ally is not Australia, it's Canada. And if it's got an even closer one, it might be Mexico. They're the nearest neighbours. They've been long-term trading partners. They've been friends. But that's the first place Trump turned. And in addition, an extra 10% tariff on China as well. So that's the three biggest trading partners of the United States.
So do you think tariffs on Australian goods are likely or not?
Look, mate, I've been talking to people all around the world, and there's nothing you can do but guess with this guy because trying to think about this as part of some grand strategy, to think that the Canadians are America's darkest enemy that we need to attack and begin a trade war with is absurd on its face. So you really just can't tell what's going to happen. He ran for election on across-the-board tariffs on all countries. And if there was any country that was really going to face the ire of the president, it was China. So the good news for Australia is it looks like he's looking a little more closely at home, getting a lot of headlines out of it, and hopefully the rest of the world is receding into the background.
Now, the Australian share market has tumbled more than 1% on fears of a global trade war. How do you expect other bigger markets to react when they open?
Yeah, American futures trade just opened about half an hour ago, and US futures are down 2% as well. So I think what's happening there is the Australian market is following the American market. The American market fell, and it fell sharply. And one thing to realize is that Trump, in fact, had announced that he was going to move forward with these tariffs on Thursday. So in some sense, what happened on Saturday isn't that big of a news for the market. So what this is markets saying, we think this is an absolutely foolish thing in terms of it's definitely going to hurt American businesses.
And what is the extent of the damage that we're expecting these tariffs to cause?
Well, there's the short run and the small stuff and the larger stuff. So the easy stuff for economists to talk about is maple syrup's about to get a lot more expensive for us, and so are avocados. And in fact, so is everything that we import from our nearest neighbours, particularly fruit and vegetables. But the whole promise of trade integration, particularly what used to be known as NAFTA, the free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico that the previous President Trump renegotiated, was that we could build factories anywhere in North America and trade would be incredibly integrated. So up where I'm coming to you from near Detroit, we're close to the Canadian border. And the cars that we manufacture, sometimes the car seats come from across the border, and sometimes the leather for the car seats goes from here across to Canada, and a single car park could go across the border 6 times. And so it's going to be particularly difficult for those deeply integrated industries. The more problematic longer run thing is last time we had Trump tariffs, the administration was happy to make exceptions. You had to apply. And so Trump's mates got a better deal. And so you could imagine all sorts of companies right now lining up at the White House. And you might be asking yourself, is this the beginning of some form of crony capitalism where the threat of tariffs is what he uses to bring American businesses to heel? They'll turn up at the White House either with some sort of offering, a campaign donation, or words of praise for the president.
So turning the focus back onto Australia again for the moment, if these tariffs are contained to what's been announced so far, to what extent will Australia feel the effects of them, and could some of it be positive?
Absolutely, some of it could be positive. Our friends in Canada, they're not just our friends, they're also our trading rivals for certainly some commodities. And so a lot of what's going to happen is people just changing their suppliers. So the Americans are going to be buying stuff that they used to buy from Canada from other countries, which includes the Aussies. Now, the Canadians are going to have extra stuff to sell, and they might then be selling it against some of our existing customers. So there'll be a lot of, think of it as a big game of global trade musical chairs. But to the extent that business is being routed away from countries that we do business with, particularly Canada, that may be slightly good for Australia.
Now, why are China's tariffs lower?
Well, there are other tariffs on China, but you're asking the question, look, mate, I'm an economist, and I woke up and I read the papers and it said, tariffs up to 25% on Canada and 10% on China. And you're asking me to make sense of that, and there's not an economist on earth who can make sense of that, mate.
Their complaint to the WTO is a different approach than we've seen from Canada and Mexico, or what we're expecting from Mexico. Is that a smart move?
Well, there's two things that they're doing, all the countries are doing, which is they're going to retaliate, which is to put tariffs on American goods. And in particular, both Canada and Mexico have shown some political savvy that they're going to put tariffs on goods that are particularly made in Trump country. So Tennessee whiskey, Florida oranges, and so on. Now, in fact, you're not meant to put tariffs on other countries. And so the way you're meant to do it is you're meant to go to the WTO and complain, hey, those guys aren't playing by the rules. That's what China's doing. It's complaining. But the WTO's only power is it then says to China, well, guess what? You're now allowed to levy retaliatory tariffs. Yeah. So Canada, it seems, isn't waiting for the WTO. Part of what China's trying to do is embarrass the United States. The Prime Minister of Canada is in a far more delicate situation as he's trying to talk to someone and pretend that Trump is his friend at the same time as he's not being treated at all like a friend.
And Professor Wolvers, we keep hearing this line of fears of a global trade war. At what point would it be considered to be one?
Well, I think the shoe that we're waiting to drop is the United States going to have tariffs on everyone, on all countries, which obviously would include Australia. You would then expect all of those countries to have retaliatory tariffs back against the United States. My advice to Australia, by the way, is I wouldn't bother. Just because someone else throws rocks in their harbour, that is, makes trade difficult, doesn't mean that you should either. But it would be a very different kind of trade war. There wouldn't be a lot of different trading blocks. Basically, this would be the US cutting itself off from the rest of the world, and the rest of the world saying, if that's how you're going to do it, then darn you, you're off in the corner by yourself. So I expect that the rest of our trading relationships would remain very much intact and, in fact, in some sense become closer as people look for replacements for the unreliable Americans. And maybe that's the opportunity for Australia. We can be the reliable mates down under.
Justin Wolvers, Professor of Public Policy and Economics at the University of Michigan. Thank you for speaking with us.
A great pleasure.